On October the 15th of 2021, law enforcement in Troup County, Georgia, responded to reports of a car crash on Highway 18. They found 29-year-old Akila Weir unresponsive in her Honda Accord after it had been slammed into a tree. Upon further examination of the scene, law enforcement discovered that Weir had been shot multiple times through the vehicle. She passed away from her injuries in a Columbus area hospital while 33 weeks pregnant with her 6th child, who also didn't survive. What was initially suspected to have been a case of road rage was eventually investigated as a targeted murder. The gunman was identified as 30-year-old Alonso Dagan Jr., an active-duty Army sergeant stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. He was married with children and had been having an affair with Weir, whom he'd reportedly known since childhood. Dagan wasn't a father to any of her other children, but she'd become pregnant with his child during their tryst, and it was suspected that he'd killed her to prevent the extramarital relationship from being exposed. Dagan, who'd served in Afghanistan and had received multiple commendations during his military career, was in Troup County at the time of the murder, and he drove a silver Nissan, which had been spotted at the scene. He was arrested and charged with murder, feticide, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime, with his court appearance scheduled for the fall of 2022. Number 6. Gerald Michael Bullinger. After the death of her husband, Utah woman Naja Medley started dating commercial pilot Michael Bullinger in the mid-2010s. By all accounts, the relationship was promising, and Bullinger became a father figure for the woman's teenage daughter, Peyton. He took her on hikes, taught her how to shoot and wrestle, and she reportedly started calling him Dad. As she and her mother struggled financially, Bullinger moved both to a farm he'd bought in Caldwell, Idaho, in the spring of 2017. Naja, then in her late 40s, shared her excitement about the move on social media. She'd go on to post photos and videos with Bullinger, her daughter, and of their seemingly idyllic life together on the rural property. Then on June the 8th, they received an unexpected visit from a woman by the name of Gerald Baker. The 57-year-old had been married to Bullinger since 2010 and had bought the farm with him. She remained in Ogden, Utah to sell their home while Bullinger claimed he was doing maintenance work on the farmhouse. Baker had recently retired from her job as a school teacher and had decided to surprise her husband by making the drive to Caldwell weeks earlier than they'd planned. It was subsequently determined that Baker and Medley didn't know each other and were stunned to learn about Bullinger's double life. What followed hasn't been concretely determined. On June the 19th of 2017, the mother of one of Peyton's friends asked law enforcement to perform a welfare check at the farm because no one had heard from the teen or her mother. As officers reached the scene, they detected a foul smell emanating from a shed, which Naja had at one point mentioned in her social media videos. Upon further investigation, officers discovered 3 partially decomposed bodies, which were later confirmed as Gerald Baker, Naja, and Peyton. All 3 had been killed via a single gunshot to the head, execution style, and had been dead for at least 10 days. Bullinger, then 60 years old, became the prime suspect in the murder, but he was never found. On July the 12th of 2017, his car was discovered in the Bridgeteton National Forest in Wyoming. The forest measures over 3.4 million acres and is populated by wolves, grizzly bears, and coyotes. The running theory was that Bullinger died either by his own hand, in an animal attack, or from exposure, but no concrete evidence in that regard was found as of the latest updates. Number 5. Rosario DiGiralamo. Leading up to the summer of 2007, married New Jersey man Rosario DiGiralamo was maintaining 2 households, one with his wife and son in Millstone, as well as another in Hightstown with his mistress, Amy Giordano, and the baby boy he'd had with her. 27-year-old Giordano was reportedly asking for a new apartment and threatened to reveal the affair to DiGiralamo's wife. The man had reportedly become strained by what he'd perceived as financial pressure from his mistress. They argued in June of 2007, and the computer analyst, then in his 30s, fatally struck Giordano in the head with a hammer. He then dismembered her body with a hacksaw, placed her remains in a suitcase, and dumped them in a New York City pond with the help of his longtime friend, Staten Island man John Russo. In the murder's aftermath, DiGiralamo abandoned the couple's 11-month-old son in the parking lot of a Delaware hospital. The child, Michael, was safely recovered by a nurse, and relatives who recognized him from TV news reports came to learn Giordano was missing. By then, DiGiralamo had quit his job, abandoned his other family, and fled to Italy, where he remained for about 2 months. He eventually returned to face child abandonment charges in Delaware, to which he pleaded guilty. Giordano's body still hadn't been found by March of 2008, when DiGiralamo was returned to New Jersey and charged with her murder. Within days, Russo was also arrested and charged with tampering with evidence. He agreed to testify against DiGiralamo and led the authorities to the pond, where they found a suitcase containing a torso that was confirmed as Giordano's. DiGiralamo's legal defense maintained that his crime had been one of sudden passion and that he hadn't meant to kill his mistress. A judge would reject that argument after evidence indicated DiGiralamo had searched for lethal karate blows to the back of the head online 2 days before the murder. In light of the evidence, DiGiralamo struck a deal and pleaded guilty to aggravated manslaughter, for which he was sentenced to 25 years in prison with a minimum of 21 years served in 2011. Number 4. Abdul Salam Gunay. Turkish man Abdul Salam Gunay met up with 30-year-old Didem Mengu, a woman who'd been his mistress for nearly 10 years, on the evening of December the 9th of 2019 at her home in Istanbul. They drank alcohol and had intercourse. A heated argument erupted during the rendezvous after Gunay had reportedly called Mengu by his wife's name while in bed with her. Gunay would later tell law enforcement that he got really angry during the row and struck Mengu in the head with a cobblestone before strangling her. Upon realizing she was dead, the father of two fled the scene in Mengu's car, but later returned to the apartment, placed her body in a suitcase and kept her phone. The Anatolian 16th High Criminal Court found him guilty of deliberate killing, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Number 3. Larry Dunn. Texas man Larry Dunn, a married father, met 28-year-old Cicely Bolden through a dating app in 2012, and they soon started having intimate relations. A few weeks into the affair, Bolden told Dunn during a phone conversation that she was HIV positive. Dunn believed that he'd contracted the virus, and about a week after the reveal returned to Bolden's Oak Cliff apartment with what he'd later claimed was an intention to slap her around a little bit. However, upon arriving at her home, they had unprotected intercourse once more. Dunn became enraged when the woman reportedly brought up the HIV conversation again. He grabbed a steak knife from the kitchen, concealed it in his pocket, and went to lie beside her in bed. Dunn then stabbed her in the neck twice, later telling the police that Bolden only saw the knife when it was sticking out of her throat. He abandoned her bloodied, half-naked body in bed to be found by her children. Law enforcement learned from the victim's friends and family that she'd been seeing Dunn and arrested him as a person of interest. He initially denied any involvement with the murder, but then admitted that he'd been in an intimate relationship with Bolden. After the police found blood in his car, Dunn confessed to the murder in a video-recorded interview. He told detectives, "In my mind, I'm already dead," adding, "She killed me, so I killed her." Preliminary tests found that he hadn't been infected with HIV. His defense tried to argue that he'd acted in sudden passion, which would have seen him serve anywhere from 2 to 20 years, but he was ultimately given a 40-year sentence. Number 2. Eric Charles Mourned. On March the 12th of 2020, Holly Williams and William Lanway, both in their 30s, were found dead in a crashed car at a construction site in Nashville, Tennessee. They'd been gunned down, and an investigation revealed a complex murder-for-hire conspiracy, at the center of which sat an automotive magnate by the name of Eric Charles Mourned. The married 46-year-old based in Austin, Texas, would reportedly have relations with Williams during his visits to Nashville. Lanway, whom sources described as Williams' boyfriend, became aware of the affair and texted Mourned, threatening to expose it unless he was paid off. The mistress's degree of involvement in the extortion attempt remained unclear. Roughly 11 days later, however, she and Lanway would be shot dead. Upon receiving the threats, Mourned reached out to fellow Austin man Gilad Peled. He presented himself as a former Mossad agent and a former member of the Israeli Defense Forces, but only the latter was confirmed. he ran the company Spear Tip Security, which stated one of its specializations as responding to extortion demands. Peled contracted Brian Brockway and Adam Carey, two former members of the Marine Corps, with a background in special operations. Wire transfers indicated that Mourned had paid the trio over $750,000 to kidnap and murder Williams and Lanway for their extortion attempts. Brockway and Carey conducted in-person surveillance of the victims and submitted intelligence reports to Peled on March the 5th and 9th, with the latter concluding that Lanway was living at Williams' residence. 2 days later, communication between Mourned and Peled, carried out through email, cell phone, and encrypted messaging apps, indicated that they discussed the kidnapping and murder. Then on the 12th, Brockway and Carey shot Lanway multiple times, including twice in the head, as they ambushed the couple in the parking lot of Williams' apartment building. The former Marines kidnapped the woman and drove her to the construction site with Lanway's lifeless body, where they killed her in similar fashion. Mourned's connection to the plot was revealed after he'd left a glowing online review of Spear Tip, praising their speed of execution and professionalism. All four men were arrested in December of 2021 and subsequently indicted on multiple charges in connection to the double murder. As of December of 2022, Peled pleaded guilty to the charges of murder for hire, conspiracy to kidnap with death resulting, and kidnapping resulting in death. His sentencing was scheduled for April of 2023, while Mourned and the others were still pending trial. Number 1. Timothy Bramer. 41-year-old English nurse Claire Parry was killed by her lover, Dorset Police Constable Timothy Bremer, on May the 9th of 2020. At the time of the incident, Parry, a mother of two, had been Bremer's mistress for roughly 10 years, while he was still married to his wife of 14 years, Martha, a detective on the same force. In the weeks leading up to the incident, Parry had contacted one of Bremer's former lovers, 35-year-old Detective Constable Kate Rhodes, on Facebook. Rhodes, who'd ended her tryst with Bremer years prior upon finding out he was married, would later describe him in court as a groomer who has a toolkit he uses on every woman he encounters. Others on the force reportedly knew he was a womanizer, but his charming persona and the fact he was well-liked led to his sins being overlooked. Through their talks on social media, Parry and Rhodes determined that he had other lovers in the emergency services. Parry, whose relationship with Bremer had led to the end of her marriage, told Rhodes that she'd be embarking on a campaign to ensure the man's long and slow downfall. It would reportedly involve telling his wife that he was unfaithful, referring him to a police watchdog, and reporting him to the tax authorities for failing to declare a second income he got from doing odd jobs. On May the 9th, Martha believed that her husband was out buying some steaks, but he'd actually met with Parry in the parking lot of the Horns Inn pub in Dorset. They argued in his car, and Parry asked for his phone to check if he'd been seeing someone else. She instead used it to message Martha, "I'm cheating on you." A fight erupted in the vehicle that ended with Bremer breaking his mistress's neck in 3 places. CCTV caught him walking shoeless across the car park to the pub entrance, where he sat down, covered in his own blood, and asked a passerby for help. He'd stabbed himself in the forearm 3 times and told the police Parry had attacked him, a statement which he eventually recanted. Body cam footage, which was subsequently played in court, would show a shirtless Bremer crying while receiving treatment in the ambulance. He'd later claimed that Parry's death had been an accident caused by him leaning on her neck while trying to force her out of the car after she'd refused to leave. The 40-year-old was found not guilty of murder, but convicted of her manslaughter following a trial at Salisbury Crown Court. His jail term, which was initially 10.5 years, was found too lenient by the Court of Appeals, which increased the sentence by 3 years in March of 2021. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be cheated on or violently mugged? Let us know in the comments section below.